afternoon. My name is Karen Mundine and I'm the CEO of Reconciliation Australia. And I'm your host today for the event. Now, I'm joining you from Gadigal country here in the sunny Sydney Basin. And I just wanted to say Happy National Reconciliation Week. Our theme for this week is In This Together. And when we came up with this idea or this theme last year, we had no idea that, in fact, we would be coming to you in this virtual, digital way. So the focus of our event today is about celebrating the resilience of First Nations people. And I am so excited to be with you today. Now, our first guest is someone who I think needs no introduction. He is a Gunditj Mara Bundjalung singer and songwriter. He has performed so many songs. He has arias. He has a Human Rights Achievement Award. He is a member of the Order of Australia. And he is the voice of the Stolen Generations with that iconic song, Took the Children Away. Can I please welcome Uncle Archie Roach?
Hello. There's a reconciliation. It's like two stories coming together. It's where the fresh water meets the salt water. Two different stories coming together, making a new story. And that's what reconciliation is. It's a new story where we're all the authors of that new story. Yeah. And so the song I'm going to sing is We Won't Cry. It's about walking alongside each other and helping each other to just to process pain and trauma in a more positive sort of way. When your burden too heavy, that it's gonna break you, and you might go crashing to the ground. Just keep yourself steady and don't let it take you on down, take you on down. I'm here beside you, don't you forget it. I'm in you walking down that road. You love what's inside you, you won't regret it. Together we can lighten the load. Oh, we won't cry, we won't cry. Oh, we will lift our spirits high up to the sky. You did the same for me when I was in trouble. I wanted to disappear out of sight, but you wouldn't let me. You were so stubborn. You brought me out of that dark night. And oh, we won't cry, we won't cry. Oh, gonna lift our spirit high up to the sky. Sing low, we won't cry, we won't cry. Oh, gonna lift our spirits high up to the sky. You and I.
Thank you so much, Uncle Archie.
Thank you.
It's so amazing to hear your voice and so amazing to see you so well as well. Thank you for joining us at Reconciliation Week and for this very special digital performance.
Thanks for having us, eh?
Yeah, it's been great. So in my opening, I forgot to mention that I am a Bundjalung woman from northern New South Wales. And while I'm here on Gadigal country, I pay my respects to the elders, those that have passed, those that are with us today, and those that are yet to emerge into a new and brighter future. And hopefully wherever you are and joining us from, that you're also paying respect and acknowledging those elders of your country. Now, this is an amazing day, and it's great to see a number of our RAP partners coming together to talk reconciliation. And PwC, Indigenous Consulting, ANZ and Wesfarmers are working together to host this amazing event and celebrate the resilience of First Nations peoples and Australians. It's great to see all of you across your organisations nationwide, and I can see the numbers are, yes, going up. So I'd just like to say a big hello to you all, and especially to any of your family and friends that are also joining us in this virtual world. Now, I'd like to introduce you to a couple of people just to say a few words about who they are, where they're coming from, but more importantly, their ideas in reconciliation. We're going to be shortly joined by Tom Sawyer, who's the CEO of PwC, Gavin Brown, the co-CEO of PwC Indigenous Consulting, Kath van der Weer, the ANZ Group Executive of Talent and Culture, and Rob Scott, the CEO of Wesfarmers. They're going to acknowledge the country and the custodians of lands from where they're joining us.
Thanks, Karen, and it's Tom Seymour here, and welcome everyone. It's great to have you on this virtual session today on what is a really important week for us as Australians, I think. At PwC, I think one of the real joys I've had over the last year as our sponsor of our reconciliation program from our executive team has been just to get to learn more about the amazing culture of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia, and to get to know that via conversations with a bunch of our team members and a bunch of people I've met along the way, and it's been awesome and pretty inspiring. I'd like to start by just saying that I'm talking to you today from the lands of the Turrbal and Jagera people, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present and emerging, and there is so much talent emerging in your community that I've seen, and it's awesome. I'd also like to acknowledge that the cultural authority of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and extend my respects in that regard. Reconciliation Week is a really important week, I think, for all Australians, not just Indigenous Australians, because it's an opportunity, I think, for all of us to come together to make Australia a better place, to look at the past, learn from it, and move forward and improve the future for all of us. And it's something that I'm really passionate about. In terms of what does it mean to me at PwC, my new role I've just taken on, we employ 9,000 people, and we're a training organisation. We employ so many young, smart people, and they learn with us, and whether they stay with us and become partners or they leave us and go out into jobs in the community, in commerce and not-for-profits in the government sector, we have a real opportunity with our business to hire more Indigenous people and give them the opportunity to learn and grow. And, Mundanara, who I know is watching today, said something at an event recently that really stuck with me, which was, a job in an Indigenous household changes the narrative. And that gives us an enormous opportunity, I think, as PwC to play a very small role in a very practical way in changing the narrative, and something I'm really proud of and want to do. It also, though, gives us and our non-Indigenous people in PwC an amazing opportunity to learn about new cultures, experience the amazing culture, and hopefully get out and spend time on country with a bunch of our amazing Indigenous employees. So that's a bit about why I'm passionate about this. I think there's a great opportunity for us to play a role as a firm in the Uluru Statement from the Heart. It makes really good business sense to give our Indigenous people a say in their own destiny, and it's also the right thing to do, and it's something that we want to throw our support behind. And in that regard, I want to introduce someone who has played a huge role at PwC in this regard to date, and that's Gavin Brown, who's co-CEO of PwC Indigenous Consulting Practice, and a business that we're so proud to be aligned with. So Gav, over to you, mate.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you everyone for joining. As Tom said, an important day. Here I'm, again, Gavin Brown, co-CEO of PwC's Indigenous Consulting, and I'm a Wiradjuri man from Central West New South Wales. We come to you today from our Barangaroo office here in Sydney on the land of the Gadigal. I'd like to acknowledge their ongoing custodianship and cultural connection with this land. I'd like to pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and the wisdom and connection of their old people. I'd also like to say that it's been an incredible privilege to see, Tom, the leadership you've taken in terms of the Reconciliation Action Plan, the Elevate RAP that we've pulled together, where we've made a commitment over the next 4 or so years to employ up to 100 Indigenous staff members. It's a huge commitment, and it shows the leadership of the combined organisations and where we've come to. And we see that with the catalysation of PIC as an organisation from 6.5 years ago, a complete start-up, a new member firm of the global PwC network. 6.5 years later, now 60 people, majority Indigenous owned, led and staffed. Now completed over 1,000 projects across close to 700 communities around the country. So really a considered impact, a sustainable impact, and an impact at scale. And I think for me, reconciliation, I think Uncle Archie talked about it earlier, it is both, it's two things. It's I'm hoping that people get the opportunity to really grasp and embrace and see the value of our First Nations cultures, particularly the wisdom that comes along with that, particularly in this day and age. And I think going forward, he talked about being the authors. I think the co-authors, it's Indigenous and non-Indigenous people coming together for building shared prosperity for the whole country. So that's probably it for me. And so with that, Kath, I can pass to you at ANZ. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Catherine van der Merwe, and I have the great privilege of being the executive sponsor for reconciliation with the ANZ Bank. And I joined today, like I'm sure many of you, from my home, which is actually on the traditional lands of the Boon Wurrung people. And I pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge their ownership of and continuing connection to this land. For me, a really important part of reconciliation is actually all about listening and learning. And so I'm excited about today's event because it provides a wonderful opportunity for all of us to come together virtually, but to connect with and celebrate the extraordinary resilience of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, but also importantly to learn more together about the richness of their culture. I want to thank our partners, PwC and Wesfarmers, for collaborating with us to bring this really important event together today. And with that, I'll hand over to Rob Scott from Wesfarmers.
Thanks very much, Kath, and thanks for the opportunity, everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm on today, the Noongar Whadjuk people. I'm here in Perth on the banks of the Derbarl-Yuragang, the Swan River. And I'd also like to pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and also pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land that all of you are on today as well. There are also many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander team members in our business and other businesses that have joined us online for what is a very special National Reconciliation Week event, so I welcome all of you. Now, Wesfarmers celebrates National Reconciliation Week every year, and this is obviously an unusual one in a world of physical distancing and a number of people in some states being back at work and others still working but from home. But I think it's important that we recognise that even in a world where physical distancing may be imposed, it doesn't mean that we can't connect it doesn't mean that we cannot engage. And I think this is just such a fantastic initiative to bring a number of different organisations together with the support of Reconciliation Australia to celebrate National Reconciliation Week, and also to engage and discuss and communicate in a way that we probably wouldn't have done without COVID. So I think that there are many ways in which we should be encouraged by the opportunity to connect in this virtual way, and it doesn't mean that that engagement is any less important. I think also I just wanted to say that Wesfarmers' vision, when I think about Wesfarmers' vision for Australia, it very much values and recognises Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture and heritage, and also recognises that we all have a role to play in working together to overcome some of the challenges both locally and nationally. And I think the theme this year for National Reconciliation Week of In This Together is important at a number of levels. First of all, it highlights that we all have a role to play. And across our businesses, there are many initiatives that we're getting on with around Indigenous employment, around working with Indigenous suppliers, around engaging more deeply with Indigenous communities, and also with Indigenous arts, which is an area that we're really passionate about in Wesfarmers. Now, although we have a big role to play, I must admit we get an enormous amount back. So we all share in the benefits of that engagement. And just finally, in finishing, I'd just like to thank all of the speakers, and especially Karen, for the fantastic work that's gone into organising this. Everyone has worked very hard to pull a fantastic national event together. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'll hand back to Karen.
Thank you, Rob. And really, Tom, Gavin, Kath, Rob, thank you for being fantastic reconciliation partners with us. We really value your support and the work that you do in your organisation. So thanks for being part of this. Thanks for having me as your host. And I wish you all a great National Reconciliation Week. Now, before I get to our panel, which we're all dying to hear from, I want to let you know that we have the wonderful Kelly Weitz, who's capturing our conversation. And at the end, we'll share that with you. So today we are talking about reconciliation. We are talking about being in this together. And we are privileged to hear from the amazing Isaiah Dor, a Butchulla Gurrowa saltwater man. He's the CEO and founder of ID, Know Yourself, the first Aboriginal not-for-profit mentoring organisation to prepare Aboriginal teenagers for life after foster care. And he is joined by the black magic woman herself, Mundunarra Bales, who's a Wunawara Bundjalung person, from the Wununara Bundjalung people on her mother's side, and the Birigubbi Gungaloo from her father's side. She's the managing director and founder of The Black Card, a specialist consultancy providing cultural capability, training and consultancy services to enable people and organisations to work effectively with members of the Aboriginal community. And I'm sure she is no stranger to many of you watching today. So they're going to share with us some of their personal stories of resilience and what that means, and their hopes for a reconciled Australia. And if we have some time at the end, and hopefully we will, we'll get to some of your questions. So I might leave it there and hand it over to you, Isaiah.
Borders of which we gather upon today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I do so under responsibility as a Butchulla and Gurrowa saltwater Murray man. And my skin name from Gurrowa country is Yakamari. To share a bit about my resilience and some of the experiences that I had when I was growing up in care, in foster care. So to take you all the way back to 1994, on the 3rd of June, I was born in Paddington's Women's Hospital. And it wasn't much longer after that, though, when I was around 2 months old, I was taken and put into the foster care system or out-of-home care system. And then I was monitored by the system and officially made, it's a dehumanising term they used to use, it was called ward of the state. So I was a ward of the state from when I was 4 years old until I was 18 years old. And so I grew up my entire time in foster care, shifting through multiple different amounts of foster homes. During my time in care, I went through 17 different foster homes. I was taken away from my cultural identity. I was taken away from my sense of belonging, my connection, my sense of direction and purpose. And instead, I was filled with pain and suffering, and I was to live with abusive carers. To remember back, there were times where I was just 10 years old, and I would pack up all my belongings. I had 2 photos, and one was of my mum and one was of my other sister. And that sister I never met my entire time in care. And I used to take that, my things that gave me that connection. I took in this bag, and I made my way to Sydney, because that's the place where I knew I had family. But I didn't know, I hadn't even spoken to anyone on the phone or anything. I was told once that I had family there. And so I used to run away multiple times throughout the week, pack that bag, and that was like 2 a.m. I'd do it in the morning. And I'd get to the highway, and what made me go back was, fortunately, when I was 7 years old, I was to live with my younger sister. I met her when I was 7, and we lived together throughout our time in care. She was my only family member I knew of, and she made me come back. I knew that she was the only one she was the one who had to fight through all these things that I was going through, and I had to make sure that she wasn't doing it alone. Kind of like, this year's theme, in this together. So I knew we were in this together. And me and Jola, that's her name, we used to say to each other, it's you and me against the world, because that's all we ever had was each other. And when I was going to care, I also, I didn't have the best attendance at school, and my first experience was when I was 12 years old. I met a mentor, and it was this after-school sport, and that was my first experience of someone who was going to support me and help me along my journey, even though it was, a couple times a week. But that really, really gave me a sense of belonging, finally, someone to look up to and aspire to and be like. And, when I was a kid, I knew that I was never going to be taken to Disneyland. I was never going to be into that happy place, but I knew that I could take myself anywhere in my mind. And I didn't know back then, but I used to manifest things. I used to think of things in my mind before they even become a reality. I used to think, for example, as a kid, I was given these hand-me-down makeshift brown Velcro sandals, right? That make the sound. And I used to have to wear that to school, and I used to have to play sport in that. And I used to train at this little local park and clock up around 6 kilometres from a little pedometer I found in a Nutrigrain box. And I used to envision myself making it to state cross-country championships. And no one from my primary school had ever done it. And so I used to run around the local park and around the school, and, everyone would be beeping their horns or waving at me, mowing their lawns, right? And it was kind of like I was the Forrest Gump of the town or something. And soon enough, I had people from my school joining me and running behind me. And I eventually did make it to state cross-country championships in those Velcro sandals. And so I didn't know I think when I relate back to why I had that resilience was, whilst I was in cares, I remember as a young kid, I threw up a ball to the sky, and it never came down. And I looked around me to see if it got caught in a tree or something, but it never come down. And so from that point on, I had the narrative in my head that I was some sort of superhero, that I had like ultimate strength. And so when I was in those tough times where I would be, abused from my carers, just inch of voice from my face, the carers would say, "Isaiah, you're a nobody. You're not gonna amount to anything in your life. That's why you're in foster care. You belong in jail just like your parents." And so when I was hearing those things, I used to think to myself, "Well, I'm a superhero. That don't affect me. I'm going to get through this." And so I didn't know where that resilience was coming from until later in life. I heard my old people's story. So, I'm 25 years old now. A lot of people say, "Hey, 25?" I guess, when I was a young kid, I had to learn how to survive. I used to have to steal food from the local Woolworths just to get by and feed my younger sister and I whilst our foster carer would go out the whole day and leave me and my younger sister without any food or water. You know, I used to have to survive. So I think I've grown up into that adulthood when I just should have been grown up as a child. I had to basically become an adult as a child. And once I eventually, I found my family through Facebook, right? From all places. My family had messaged me, inboxed me, introducing themselves, saying, I'm your auntie so-and-so, I'm your uncle so-and-so. This is how we're related. We haven't stopped looking for you guys. You know, give us a call whenever you can. And because I was brainwashed by the system, I thought that they never wanted to see me and my younger sister, that my family didn't want to see us. And so we believed it. And it was only until I was 22 years old, I trusted the process, and I called my auntie. And I remember speaking to her on the phone, and her name's Auntie Sono, and I spoke to her, and I felt the love and the compassion and also, you know, the hope through the phone that, you know, everything's going to be all right. You know, you've got to come home and meet the rest of the family. We all have been searching for you, and eventually I did do that. And when I heard, you know, I met one of my uncles. His name's Uncle Fred Leone, and he's one of the songmen from Bachelor Country, where I'm from. And, you know, he said to me, Isaiah, if you take care of culture, culture will take care of you. And by that time, I didn't know much about my culture. You know, I was unfortunately one of those thousands of kids who were taken from it. And so, you know, when I heard a statement like that, I was like, wow, what does that even mean, you know? And so I did more research, and worked on myself culturally and gaining the knowledge and building up my cultural spirit, that I found out what he was talking about, you know, and I found that out when I hit those hard times. And those are the hard times when I was working in the space I do, which is kids who are exactly like me, you know, going through the same things like me. So that can bring up my own traumas from my experiences. And so when I reflected back one day and saw what I was doing, after every big day, because my uncle, he gave me a didgeridoo, and they're part of our culture from Gadawa country, is he playing didgeridoo. So I played it every day, and eventually was able to circular breathe and play different rhythms. And I asked my uncle, why do we play the didgeridoo? He says, well, that's the way we speak to our ancestors. And so after those long days and, you know, experiences that I may have, you know, the vicarious trauma, you know, stories, things that people told me, I've taken that on. I help myself heal and empower my spirit through playing the didgeridoo and also painting. And so looking back, I was like, well, that's what he meant. You know, take care of culture, culture will take care of you. And so
And you're doing such a great job of that, Isaiah. You are an amazing young man, and I've heard your story a number of times now, and every single time you just inspire me. And I'm amazed that you're still only as young as you are, doing fantastic things. Now, we've got a few questions that are coming through, and we'll get to those in a second. But those who have yet to come up with your questions, there is a Q&A button on the bottom left-hand side of your screen, so keep them coming through. But I might flick over to our Black Magic woman there, our sister, Manjanara Bales.
Can you hear me?
Oh, of course we can hear you, girlfriend, all the time.
All right. Thank you, my sister, and happy National Reconciliation Week to all of you. And I really quickly just want to acknowledge that I'm on Yagara country, which is south of the Brisbane River. And I also want to pay my respects to the Turrbal people who are north of the Brisbane River and acknowledge their old people. Acknowledge our elders that are still with us today and are still fighting the good fight. And in saying that, I want to acknowledge my elders who have gifted me with my cultural knowledge to do the work that I do. So when we acknowledge traditional owners, I think this is really important to understand that we are, not just myself as an Aboriginal woman, but all who participate in the acknowledgement of traditional owners, we are continuing a tradition that dates back tens of thousands of years in this country. It is an ancient diplomatic protocol that has been in practice by our people for at least 140,000 years. That's the archaeological evidence that dates us back in this country. Instead of getting into arguments, we just say tens of thousands of years. So if you're a non-Aboriginal person and you want to participate in the oldest continuous culture on the planet and you want to become part of our culture, then you can. You don't have to go as far as Uluru to immerse yourselves in Aboriginal culture. When you undertake the same responsibilities and obligations to this land, then you're becoming part of our culture. So don't see the acknowledgement as being politically correct, because political correctness came in yesterday compared to how long we've been here. The acknowledgement is so important. It's a diplomatic tradition, and one I think more Australians are becoming more confident in carrying out. Brother Isaiah, I've only talked to you once or twice. I just want to say thank you for sharing your story, and I know you share it a lot, and I do it in my day job as well. So I just want to say thank you, Uncle Archie. Trying not to cry here. I didn't want to mess my makeup up, but listening to Uncle Archie and hearing about, let us do this together and we could take some of the weight off our shoulders really hit home for me. And I'm going to share why in a moment. Really quickly, the partners that put this on, thank you so much for the invitation to be part of this amazing event. PwC and ANZ, two of our biggest clients. If it wasn't for you guys, I wouldn't be standing here today. When COVID hit, it was the first time I'd ever suffered with mental health issues. So thank you very much for standing by me personally and by Black Card, because I'm standing here today. So thank you. So I'm going to introduce myself based on Aboriginal terms of reference, which is based on who I am as a human being instead of what I do. And once you understand who I am, you'll know why I do what I do. So my name is Mundanara, and in my father's language, which is Birrigabba language, in North Queensland, Mundanara means rainbow. And I actually was born in Sydney. I grew up in Redfern. I too was born at Paddington Hospital. I grew up in Redfern on the block. So I always refer to being from the block, growing up on the block, and literally life in Redfern for me with 8 of my sisters back in those days was really fun. I really enjoyed the fact that every person in Redfern knew who you was, every family knew who you belonged to, so you could go out all day long and come home when the sun went down and you were okay. So growing up in Redfern, my mother actually was a Wanneroo, a Bundjalung woman from the Hunter Valley. But my mother, like you too, Isaiah, was a ward of the state. My mother was literally the 5th, so I would say that I'm the first generation on my mother's side that wasn't forcibly removed under government policy. So when we talk about our history in this country, we're talking about very recent history. And it's in people's living memories of what they endured and suffered under those policies. So I feel a little bit guilty now, Isaiah, after hearing your story, because the first thing that I say is that I had the privilege of growing up in my own household with my own mother and father and with my own 8 siblings. That is a privilege as an Aboriginal person in this country, to actually grow up in your own household with your own mother and father. I know a lot of Aboriginal people in this country can't say the same, and Isaiah, you just demonstrated that. 6 generations on my mother's side, all forcibly removed. We actually go back to Redfern, which is the block. We go back to Redfern, 5 generations. So that to me is amazing. So I'm a Koori. I moved to Brisbane about 25 years ago because my dad's a Murray and my mum's a Koori. I also want to acknowledge that I also have Irish ancestry. My mother had red hair and freckles. Her last name was O'Reilly and looked as Irish as they come. If she wasn't Irish, she may have had the privilege to grow up with her Aboriginal mother. But unfortunately, having an Irish father was the reason that they fit the criteria in terms of forcible removal if you had European heritage. So my mother always acknowledged her Irish ancestry, even though she didn't get to meet her father. I also want to acknowledge my Scottish ancestry on my dad's side, because if it wasn't for my great-great-grandfather, then my great-grandmother would have been born under the Protection Act and sent to Warrabinda. But her father was a wealthy man in Rockhampton in central Queensland, and he got her exempt from being under the Protection Act. So I want to acknowledge my non-Aboriginal ancestry as well. Growing up in Redfern, coming to Queensland, I come from a family that have been at the forefront of our political movement, of our struggle for recognition to even be citizens in our own country. I come from that family, and I feel privileged that I grew up with our culture, with our songs, with our dances, with identity. I grew up with all of that. And I didn't know that other kids didn't have that. I thought that was normal. When we came to Brisbane in 1990, it was very different to growing up in Redfern. And I just feel really blessed that my father brought us to Brisbane and chose another place to grow up his children. So I've had the best of both worlds. I'm not talking about the Aboriginal world and the Western world. I've had the best of both worlds, growing up in an Aboriginal community like Redfern and being part of that community, and then coming to Brisbane where you couldn't just walk outside your front door anymore. You couldn't just go down the street and play with anyone. There was no one there. There was no kids in our street. It was a good 40-minute drive to see families because Brisbane is so spread out. So very big different lifestyle changes for us. And I must say we kind of resented our father for quite some time from taking us from everything that we knew, which was the block. And about 10 years later, I finished high school. I'm the first on both sides of my family to finish year 12. And I've got 8 sisters, 5 above me and 3 below me. And my dad said to me, if you finish year 12, because no one's done it before, I'll take you anywhere around the world. And I chose Fiji. But anyways, I finished year 12 and I went to Fiji. And when Brother Isaiah talked about, going to these happy places like Disneyland and so on, I had never, ever been on a holiday because there's 8 kids in Redfern, going to Bondi or La Perouse on the weekend. If we did maybe school holidays, that was an adventure. So a holiday wasn't part of my vocabulary. We didn't even know what a holiday was growing up in Redfern because no other kids on the block went on a holiday. So to go on a holiday with my father was a time I'll never forget. And I must say that if I didn't have someone like my father who inspired me and motivated me, I wouldn't have finished year 12. I wouldn't have gone to do what I've done today. Out of my 8 sisters, 5 gave birth before they turned 16. And that kind of turned me off then from having children because I was looking after everyone else's children. I finished year 12. I thought I was going to take a year off and I didn't. I went straight into the government and done a Cert 3 traineeship in business. Little did I know that in that department where I was working, Department of Families, they managed the Youth Detention Centre. So my dream growing up, coming from Redfern and going to the Murray School in Brisbane, my dream was to go to the detention centre and see why all of my friends and family, why were they there? What was so good about the detention centre that everybody frequently made trips there or had these kind of holidays there? I wasn't game enough to jump in a stolen car or to do anything wrong or break the law because my dad was quite scary. But I definitely had this desire to go into a youth detention centre and hopefully work there. So here I am, 17. By the way, I finished high school at 16. 17, I'm working in the government, and a girlfriend in that department said to me, how long do you have to finish your traineeship? And I said, basically, I'm finished. I'm holding on to one module so that I can keep getting paid for the 12 months. So 8 months into it, I had finished my traineeship, and she had got a job at Brisbane Youth Detention Centre, which just opened up here in Brisbane, as the admin manager. And she said, why don't you come out to the Youth Detention Centre and be my admin support? And I was just blown away that I now at 17 was about to take the job of my life. And I could tell you now, when I turned up to that youth detention centre, where about 80% are Aboriginal children out of about 110 kids. And I knew nearly every single one of those kids, nearly every single one of them were family and they were part of my community. So when I saw them every day, I looked forward to going to work to see these young people. 6 months down the track, just about to get up and go to work, and my dad knocked on our door because I was living with my sister, knocked on my door and he was crying. And it's like 6 a.m. and I'm getting ready for work. And he said, your mother died. And I was like, your mother died. I thought his mother died. And I was crying thinking his mother died. He said, no, your mother died. And I was like, what? My mother? And basically my mum went back to Sydney for a holiday. as she did all the time, 10 years in Brisbane. My mum went back to Redfern at least every 3 months. She just had to go home. So my mum was 45 on a holiday in Redfern and she had a heart attack. And that, I guess, changed my life forever, because the next day I told my boss that, my mum has passed, I've got to go to Sydney. And he said, well, because you're acting in that role and your interview's not till next week, you may as well say that was your last day yesterday. And I said, what do you mean? Basically, he said, I didn't have a job to come back to. So 17, I thought I was, in the prime of my life and my career, and I was achieving things I never thought were possible for a 17-year-old from Redfern, and then my mum died. So my mum died at 45. And for me, when you look at statistics of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and life expectancy, I guess that's what motivates me to do the work that I do, to educate Australians, to educate our own people, so that we're in a better position to figure out how we're going to live in this country together. So on that note, I just want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to share a little bit about my story. And if it wasn't my mother and my grandmothers, I wouldn't have the resilience that I have to keep waking up every day, to keep educating Australians. So thank you.
Thank you, Mandanara. That's just such an amazing story. And I knew both of your parents, and they were very impressive people. And I dare say that your dad scared a lot of people, myself included, as a young comms person. He always put the hard word and asked the hard questions and challenged me every step of the way. So I think you absolutely do them proud. Now, of course, the stories that both Mandanara and Isaiah shared with us, if that has brought anything up for anyone that's out there listening, if it's kind of triggered anything for you, please do reach out to your people within your organisations, your community care people, because you don't need to go through this alone. And I guess that's the theme that we've been talking about with National Reconciliation Week. We are all in this together. Even if we are socially distant, we're still culturally connected. Hopefully we've got time for a few questions. I see you back on screen there, Isaiah. So I might ask this one of you. If there was just one thing that each of us could do to create a bigger ripple effect for change, what would you do? Or what would you ask of us?
And thank you so much, Mandanara. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate that. I know you know a lot of my mob up there in Brisbane too. And I think, well, for me, I believe if there's hope in the future, there's power in the present. And so, with the work that we do at ID Know Yourself, we represent hope. Like Mandanara was saying, 5 generations of her family have been affected from forced removal. And for my family, that's been 4 generations, and for my great-grandfather, he was part of Stolen Generations. My great-grandmother, she was part of Stolen Generations. And my great-grandmother was born on Gari, which is a traditional place of Fraser Island, a traditional name, Fraser Island. And she was taken when she was 11 years old. And my great-grandfather, he was taken from Westmoreland Station in Queensland and taken to Barrenbar Mission in Cherbourg. And eventually... he was taken to Palm Island, and then eventually he escaped. He was one of the only men to escape, and he was captured and taken to Barrenbar Mission Cherbourg. And then they had children of their own, so they had my nanas and my pops, and then they were taken to girls and boys dormitories. And then my nan had my mum and my uncles, and then and aunties, and then they were taken to foster homes. And then my mum had us children, and we were taken to foster homes. And so for 4 generations, you can see it's lasted. But with everything that we do, we represent hope. And this is the generation where it stops. It stops with me, it stops with my siblings, and it stops with every single young person that ID Know Yourself works with. And
couldn't agree more, Isaiah. That is so right. It does stop with us, and not just in terms of stopping with you in terms of that intergenerational, but I guess it also stops with us in terms of the way that we question or the way that we engage in our issues. So for our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters that are walking with us on this journey, it's actually how do things stop with you, whether it's racism, whether it's those colonial ideas. I might just bring you in, Mandanara, if I can. So what's the one thing that we can do to respectfully recognise the injustices of the past?
It's a great question, and I think I answer it differently every time someone asks me. And I think the biggest thing is that we need to understand who we are as individuals first and foremost. We need to go on our own journeys and really try and understand who we are, where we come from, and what makes us who we are. And I think once people do their own kind of soul searching or looking back in their own kind of family history, then they'll be able to better understand us as Aboriginal people, because you understand yourself. And I think for a lot of Australians, I'm not saying all Australians, but for a lot of Australians, they don't know their history, not connected to their ancestors, no connection to the UK or to wherever their ancestors come from, especially if they've been in this country for 5, 6, 7 and 8 generations. And by their, it's their birthright to call this country their home. So I'm not denying you your birthright, but what I do want to say is that for us to really understand each other and for us to walk together, I think we need to understand ourselves first as individuals, and then we can understand others. Educate yourselves. And once you're educated, you can share that with your children, with your brothers and sisters, with your wives, your husbands. Just start internally within your own influences and networks, because there's only 3% of Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people in this country. You make up the 97%. Your voice is a lot louder than ours, but we need your voice and we need you to support us. So we need to do this together.
Yeah, I could not agree more, Mandanara. So nicely said. Now, look, you mob, I could just sit here and talk, just the three of us, for a whole hour, but we're starting to run out of time. So thank you for sharing your stories with us. I know that you both do amazing work, and I support and congratulate you to continue that work, and have a great Reconciliation Week.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce Nick Patten, who's going to read a poem for us.
Thanks so much, Karen. And much respect to all of the other speakers that we've heard from today. And Uncle Archie, what a deadly performance. So heart-moving. It was absolutely beautiful, Uncle. For the title of the song, I caught myself with a bit of a tear as you began to sing. So thanks for sharing that beautiful song with us. And to Mandanara and Isaiah, it's hard to be vulnerable, but what you're doing is, as you said, Mandanara, helping other people to understand this situation. Jingiwala, Indiji Bunjalung, Indiji, Nick Paton, Indiji Ngunnawal. Hello from Bunjalung country. My name is Nick Paton and I'm a proud Ngunnawal man. I'm a journalist with the Koori Mail, Australia's only 100% Aboriginal-owned and self-funding national Indigenous newspaper. I'm also a full-time student heading into my third and final year at Ginnibi Wandaren, Southern Cross University's College of Indigenous Peoples, where I am studying a Bachelor of Indigenous Knowledge, majoring in subjects based around traditional, community and land management practices. Poetry really is something that I love, as is writing, and also a creative outlet. And today I'll be reading to you my poem, Conduit, in Ngunnawal language and then in English. But before I read you my poem, I would like to acknowledge my Ngunnawal, Irish and Scottish ancestors and elders. I also acknowledge the Widjabul Waiable people of the Bunjalung Nation, the lands on which I live, work and study. I acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional owners of the lands on which this important event is being held in Sydney today. I pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and all elders past, present and emerging, and all the custodians and lands which this event is reaching today. Also a massive thanks to Red Room Poetry Organisation and PwC for having me along here today. Reading this poem wouldn't be possible without the expertise of Ngunnawal language custodians, Uncle Tyrone Bell and Jai Bell, who have helped to translate my poem from English to Ngunnawal, an ancient language system spanning many thousands of years that belongs to the areas in and around the Canberra region. My poem Conduit is really about truth-telling and reconciliation in myself, and about coming to grips with the ongoing trauma and displacement still being experienced by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people today. The poem also ties into the fact that the land each of us are standing on right now, wherever you are in Australia, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. But we mustn't limit the reconciliation between non-Indigenous and Indigenous people to just 1 week out of the year. Reconciliation needs to occur every day. So how can you get involved in reconciliation every day? Well, the easiest way would be to get to know your local mob and the traditional name of the land you're on. If you hit up the IATSIS website, you'll find the IATSIS map of Indigenous languages and countries, and that can give you a bit of an idea as to the land you're standing on today. By doing this, you're showing that you have respect for the traditional owners of that land, and you might even find you begin to learn the local language. It's only through deep listening that we as humans really begin to learn, and I wrote this poem by listening deeply to the country beneath and around me and to my ancestors above. Conduit. Indiji Gulangaya, Nining Bilbi, Nadang Dari, Indiji Dari Darara. Indiji Gulangaya, Bayang Danu, Indiji. Gawa, Manga, Gawa. Indiji Gulangaya, Mildari. Gulangaya Mara. Danu Gulangala, Gunangu. Danu Gulangala, Narambang. Indiji Gulangaya Tambalini. Indiji Gulangaya Gawaminga. Nunaminga Yimaba Bulagana. Narandara Duni. Indiji Bunima. Danu Duniang Indiji. Dan Mara. Yimabaganan Wandini Yimabadan. Danu Diniang. Banju Indiji Gulangaya. Maragana Nanang Dari. My feet are covered in dirt from Mother Earth as I stand still on her country. I use my body as conduit as she begins to fill me with a heartfelt message, with utmost love. I open my eyes to the truth inscribed in the earth. My hands uncover the stories, her people, her places. I use my mind like a justice scale, and I endeavour to weigh up the facts with incriminating evidence, with undeniable proof. I close my heart to the trauma etched upon page. I can't comprehend this hurt. This is what you will need to know, Mother Earth will say, as I become threadbare. Winds of change, she tells me, are already on the way. You'll know when you're ready, she says. Over thick skin, I rub my hands and listen deeply to Mother Country. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nick. Winds of change, really, this is the period of time when we are in these winds of change. And I really picked up on you talking about deep listening. It's something that I grew up with, and I feel there's a bit of a Bundjalung theme going through here, but that's what my people talked about. And certainly my aunties, my grandmothers, my mother, talked about deep listening, because out of that deep listening we get learning and truth-telling, and I think that's been such a powerful theme for everything we do in reconciliation. So I don't know about all of you guys out there, but I cannot believe that we are almost out of our hour. It has been an incredible celebration of National Reconciliation Week. And also we've just heard from some amazing people. A big thank you to Uncle Archie for that beautiful, beautiful song. As always, his voice just brings me to tears. To hear from the leadership of our host partners here, with Tom, Gavin, Kath and Rob, and also to your organisations who are doing such great work here in reconciliation and through your reconciliation action plans. And thank you very much to Isaiah and to Mundanara for your sharing and being vulnerable, as you said, Nick. They are incredible stories, and really we could have just spent the hour just talking to you guys. Again, Nick, a great poem. Poetry is not usually my thing, but that certainly touches me, and it's so great to hear language as well, language that is sometimes lost, and it's really nice to know that that is being revived. And having spent quite a bit of time and spent some time on Ngunnawal country, I really appreciate that. Now, while we've been having this conversation, Kelly has been scribing away and doing an incredible job at capturing our conversation. And I'd like to leave you with this image. We'll share it along with a recording of today and today's event. Thank you again to PwC, PIC, ANZ and Wesfarmers, and it is through your working together that we are able to achieve a fully reconciled Australia. Now, the week is not over. I'm constantly reminded that we're only in day 2, so there are lots more things happening, certainly in this new and digital and virtual space. So if you head to our website, nrw.reconciliation.org.au, you'll find out all the things that are happening for the rest of this week. We've got some great musical acts coming up. There are film clubs, there are playlists, there are books and ideas, and lots of great ways that you can get involved, especially if you've never met an Aboriginal person but you like to start. There's lots of ways to start educating yourself, as Mandanara said. Now, before we go, we do have one request of you. And that is, we'd love to hear about your winds of change. And we hope to see, and what you hope to see in regards to reconciliation within your organisation, within your families, within your communities, or even beyond. So we're inviting you all to write a 6-word story or poem and recording your response. And the contributions of this 6-word poem or story will be collated into a collaborative poem by the talented poets from the Red Room Poetry, and it will be titled The Winds of Change. And once we've got all of your contributions, we'll share it with everyone. So please contribute your story. Stay online to follow that survey link when it comes on screen. Thank you again for being part of this, for listening, deep listening, as Nick says. I hope you're having a great National Reconciliation Week, and I hope that you continue to support us and walk with us as we are in this together. Thank you.